As I saw all these amazing dipped style dressers on Pinterest, I just knew I needed to create one myself. I picked up this very solid piece on Facebook Marketplace for only $90, and I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. After thoroughly cleaning it with some Simple Green, I had to start sanding the top of it, and oh my goodness, guys, this was a huge job. The finish on the top of this dresser was no joke. I have never encountered something like this. It took forever to get the finish off. I first tried a stripper, and that just really didn't work, and so sanding it was. I started with 80 grit sandpaper, which is pretty coarse, and then I moved up to 120. As you work your way up in sandpaper numbers, it will slowly close the pores of your wood. This not only allows your piece to be smooth, but it allows it to absorb any stain or paint wash evenly. After the 120 grit, I moved up to 180 grit, and that was perfect for my paint wash. Finally back at it out here. I just got the top finally stripped. It's gonna be great. I switched to my detail sander for the sides, but I soon realized that the side panels were a much thinner material than what was on the top, which was to be expected, and I decided to switch to hand sanding that, just to make sure I didn't bust through any veneer. This took a couple days of very patient and very detailed hand sanding, and I'm going to be honest, that is not my strong suit, but it was actually quite soothing. These rubber sanding grips were super helpful. You just wrap sandpaper around them and they help you to get into all sorts of different shaped nooks and crannies on your piece. I'm gonna take a break.
It's looking so good. I'm ready.
And
customers.
My fingers need a break. When all of that sanding was finally complete, I got out my Bondo wood filler. This is a 2-part epoxy wood filler that is very durable, and it is my favorite simply because it doesn't shrink. It very easily covers the areas that I need covered, and once I paint over it, I usually can't tell that I used it at all. So you mix the two agents together and it settles very quickly, usually within about 15 or so minutes. So you have to work kind of quick, filling in all the areas that you need filled. In this case, I was filling in all of the old hardware holes. I have decided on some new hardware for this piece, and it is slightly wider than what was there. And here we are sanding again. I got my detail sander out with an interface pad on it. This helps it to go over some of the rounded parts on the drawers without deforming it at all with the sandpaper. The screws holding this door on were completely stripped, so I called in my assistant, my husband, and he helped me. Then I spent some time taking off the hinges and other hardware, as well as pulling out some of the pins that were sticking out of the front of the door. They had been holding on these little wood details on the door that I had removed earlier on, and I apparently forgot to film that. Next, I lightly scuff sanded the bottom part of this dresser. I'm going to be painting it, so you don't need to strip that all the way down to bare wood, but I wanted to get it nice and roughed up with the sandpaper so that the paint would adhere really well. Then I used my shop vac to clean things up a little bit. And it was time to say goodbye to these short, clunky legs. We're going to be attaching these today, essentially. So these legs, I just bought them in a kit from Amazon. And they come with these metal plates, and you attach them to the legs, and then you attach the whole thing to the bottom of the dresser. These legs, what I'm hoping that they do are, they're just a little less chunky than what was here, but what I really wanted it to be is just a little bit taller. The other thing we're going to be doing is fixing the door. So this is the door for the middle part here, and it has this, I took the finials off that were here. And we have here now this circle, and I decided to just, at first I was like, well, I'll just keep it. the more I look at it, it's just not gonna fit what I have going with the rest of the dresser. So I decided I wanted to fill it in somehow and make it and just give it a little bit of a different design. That new design was going to come from beadboard. We measured it and then cut it and installed it in place with some wood glue first. Then we put in a few brad nails just to make sure it stayed in place. Oh my word, I'm so happy. My husband was home from work and asked how he could help, so I put him to work attaching the new legs to the dresser. Here he is drilling some pilot holes so that the legs don't split when we put the screws into them. Now, this part was a bit more tedious than I expected. I needed a really crisp line to delineate between the paint wash top and the painted bottom. So I used this frog tape to tape off where that line would be. I attached this pre-taped plastic to the frog tape to make sure that I could completely cover the top and protect it from any paint. And again, this was a little bit more tedious than I expected. Now that the top of the dresser was ready for paint, I wrapped up the bottom 6 drawers with the same pre-taped plastic. And this is when things started going wrong for me that day. I looked over at one point and saw a very large lizard crawling into my garage. And oh my word, I immediately abandoned my work and yelled for my husband and got nothing else done for the rest of the day. So now the next day, the lizard has been evicted and I am ready to get going with some paint. I wiped everything down with this microfiber cloth to get it all nice and clean to make sure that it was a perfect paint finish, and moved this dresser onto its back. Did I mention how heavy this one was? It was a very solid piece of furniture. I am using Kills Restoration Primer, which does a really good job of sealing in the wood tannins on wood pieces like this so it doesn't bleed through your paint. I got myself a new paint sprayer and this was my first go with it, and it did a pretty good job of spraying on this primer coat, but you will see I ended up having all sorts of issues with this new paint sprayer and have since returned it. I always recommend you test your paint sprayer on a piece of cardboard before you start spraying anything on your piece of furniture. Paint sprayers can seem a little intimidating, and honestly, I had nothing but issues with this particular paint sprayer, but I have in the past had no problems with figuring out different paint sprayers and getting a flawless finish very easily. They really are very user-friendly, so I highly encourage, if you are at all interested in getting some paint on a piece of furniture quickly, to try out a paint sprayer. It's also the easiest way to get a flawless finish on your paint. And speaking of flawless finishes, I also like to sand between coats with this 400 grit sanding pad. And now here I am putting on another layer of primer. Okay, so now that our second coat of primer is on, you can see we still need to probably put a third coat of primer here. And we've got some filling to do around the edge of this panel so that it'll look seamless once we get the paint on. I'm using this DAP premium wood filler to fill in the gap on the edges of this panel. Sometimes you're able to really see where the flaws are on your piece after you put the primer on. And so that is usually a great time to just use a little bit of wood filler and fill in any flaws that you see. And then I sanded that all back with a sanding pad and got ready for one more quick layer of primer. Okay, we got 3 coats of primer on here and it's looking ready to go. So we are going to be using Lily Moon's Opulent paint in the color Dried Pampas. This is an all-in-one paint, but I really do like to use a good primer and a good top coat on top of this. I strained it into my new paint sprayer, and you will see why I always say you should test your paint sprayer before you put it on your furniture, because do you see it just spitting all over the place? Oh my. So I took a break and I cleaned everything out. I watered down my paint a little bit more, and it continued to cause me nothing but issues. This sprayer is making a mess of things, so I've decided to abandon it. I've tried a few different times and it's just wasting so much paint trying to figure it out. I can't afford to just be wasting a bunch of expensive paint, especially I only have 2 containers of this. So I've decided I'm brushing the rest of it. So it is what it is. I have a zebra brush right here. Their brushes are ultra fine and they do a great job. This paint does a really great job self-leveling, and as I said, I am using a zebra brush here. They are amazing brushes. They are really worth the price, and they do such a good job of really not putting a whole lot of brush strokes into your paint. But one of the things that's really important is that when you're brushing on paint, you want to do kind of long strokes. So paint quickly, get it on there as fast as you can, and then try to smooth it out with some quick long strokes, and then make sure you leave it alone once it starts to dry. Otherwise, you're going to really see the streaks in it. And as always, I like to sand with that 400 grit sanding pad between coats, and it just makes sure that any little nubbins that got stuck in the paint come right off, and my finish is going to be flawless. I applied one more coat for full coverage. I like to use gravity to help self-level the paint. So in this case, I just propped up one end of the door to put it on a bit of an incline. Okay, I'm ready for this grand reveal. Oh my word, guys, look at the crisp line we have there. The frog tape did an amazing job of creating that perfect delineating line between the paint and what will be the paint washed top. So now I was ready to make the paint wash. I used the exact same paint, the Lily Moon Opulent in Dried Pampas, and I put just a little bit of the paint in this container. The paint was already a little bit watered down from when I had put it in the paint sprayer, and I added about 3 parts water to the 1 part paint. And then I sprayed down the top of the dresser with some water, just misted it ever so slightly, and used this staining pad from Home Depot to lightly brush it on. I decided to just do it in smaller sections to start to make sure that it was coming out the color that I wanted. Now you always want to make sure that you brush on a paint wash or a stain in the direction of the grain. And then you use a rag or a towel of some sort and wipe back any excess. Then you just repeat this process over the entire area that you want to paint wash. I did one more layer of the paint wash on top of this one just to make sure I got it to the color that I wanted. Okay, our paint wash is dry. We'll top coat everything once it's all put back together. Another quick sanding with this 400 grit sanding pad, and I was ready to top coat. I decided to use an aerosol top coat because my paint sprayer was on the fritz. I used this Miniwax polyacrylic satin coat. Overall, I was pretty happy with this. It went on pretty smoothly. There were a few splatters here and there, and I just was able to dab it up with a microfiber. I put 3 coats of this over the entire piece. So what I'm gonna do now is measure for where we're gonna put the hardware. We have knobs that are like this. And then down here, we have the matching pulls that are like this, and they are further apart than the original pulls. So I filled in the holes for the original pulls, and now the new ones are gonna go like this. But we just need to make sure that they are level and that they're exactly how we need them. So these pulls, the way you measure it is you go from the center of the hole to the center of the hole. So these are 5 inches on the dot, 5 inches. So we need 5-inch holes. So what we're gonna do is find the center, and then we're gonna go 2.5 inches to either side and make sure it's level, okay? I cleaned up the door hinges and gave them a light coating with this Rust-Oleum metallic spray paint just to make sure they looked like new. And then after hanging up the door, I brushed on 2 coats of the paint. I used my zebra artist brushes to touch up the paint on the legs and to just make sure the bottom of the piece looked good. And just like that, we were ready to stage. We used my brand new staging wall in the garage to stage this piece. I never had to carry it up into the house, which was such a relief. I just used some simple staging items to get some good clear shots. And believe it or not, this piece sold after just 40 minutes on Facebook Marketplace. So what do you think? Do you like this dipped look? I am in love with the color of this piece, and I'm wondering if I need to paint every piece in my home this color. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to have your like and subscribe. See you next time.